Hey, what's up, everyone? I recently noticed on YouTube a bunch of videos of album rankings for Kanye West, and that pretty much has inspired me to make my own video and rank his album discography. So I'm gonna go to Kanye West's album discography. So I figure go through these 8 albums and rank them from worst to best. So out of these 8 albums, I'm going to start things off with Yeezus. So for each album that I'm going to rank, I'll pick the highlights and my overall thought of why I'll rank them in these spots. So Yeezus is at number 8. And I think this is my least favorite album. Go down to the track list, and I'm going to point out songs that I liked off of the album that I would say were like highlights for me. This album as a whole, when I first heard Yeezus, I really didn't like the album in comparison to his earlier albums. And as I look at this track list all these years later, I would say that the songs that I think I still listen to today were my favorite at the time were Blood on the Leaves, Guilt Trip, and Bound 2. Those were 3 songs that back then I really enjoyed, and even to this day I still like a lot. But then there were songs on that album that really did not grow on me, and I really haven't gotten back to listening to. Those songs that I really just couldn't get into were On Sight, I Am a God, Hold My Liquor, and Send It Up. Those songs I just really couldn't get into, didn't like the overall sound of them. I will say that the production was either hit or miss on this album. As far as the guest features go, I do think that my favorite guest features were Kid Cudi, Frank Ocean, and Charlie Wilson. They were my favorite guest features. And so overall, like I said, I would rank this album number 8 for my overall least favorite album by Kanye West. Let's go into number 7. Number 7 on my ranking is going to be Ye. Now that actually recently came out only about 8 or 9 months ago. And to me, Ye had some really good moments. But at the same time, after listening to it, I was disappointed. More or less in the fact that there was only 7 songs in total, and I only really liked 5 of them. And out of the 5 songs, those songs were I Thought About Killing You, Yikes, Wouldn't Leave, No Mistake, and Ghost Town. Now, in the months that have gone by since then, I will say that All Mine has grown on me just a little bit, and maybe slightly for Violent Crimes. Now, the songs that to this day that I still come back to from now and then is, I would say, Ghost Town, Yikes, and occasionally No Mistakes. If those songs ever come up on my phone when I have it on shuffle, I listen to those all the way. Otherwise, occasionally I skip I Thought About Killing You. And the problem with that song I had is that I think Kanye spends a good 2 minutes or so just talking, and the beat really doesn't kick in until the 3-minute mark. So that song has lost some replay value for me. Wouldn't Leave is still a pretty good song. I have no issues with that. I think that Party Next Door was a good feature overall. And that's how I'm going to leave it at that for the Ye album. My favorite guest features were Ty Dolla $ign, Kid Cudi, and 070 Shake. So, 7 is the Ye album. Now let's see this list. If I'm going to pick number 6, 6 on my list is going to go to 808s and Heartbreak. at the time when this album came out back in 2008, I hated this album. I couldn't get into it back then at all. Then maybe I would say months after the album came out, this album definitely improved to me, I would say. So I'm gonna go to the track list. Songs that really stood out to me all this time later, and that I still would listen to, would be "Welcome to Heartbreak" with Kid Cudi. That was definitely one of my favorites. "Paranoid" with Mr. Hudson. Enjoyed that. "Love Lockdown." Now I enjoy that song a lot. Back then, I hated the song. Then there's "RoboCop." I think I still would say that's one of my favorites. And lastly, I would say I still enjoy "Bad News." Now, this album, 808s and Heartbreak, at the time, I wasn't used to hearing Kanye do an entire album singing in auto-tune. Back in 2008, at the time, the only two that I knew for auto-tune was T-Pain and Lil Wayne. So when I heard Kanye back then do an entire album in singing in auto-tune, I didn't care for it, hated half of the songs. But as you look at how much the music has changed in the 2010s with the usage of auto-tune, you could say a lot of different artists were influenced by 808s and Heartbreak. So as time gone by, I have the list. I have this at number 6 because still to this day, there's certain songs that I still skip or just haven't bothered to come back to listening to. Those include "Say You Will," "Amazing," "See You in My Nightmares," "Coldest Winter," and "Pinocchio Story." Those songs I just never got into, and I haven't bothered to revisit them even 10 years, 11 years later. "Heartless" is an honorable mention that I didn't mention earlier when I had mentioned my favorite songs on the album. "Heartless," I put it maybe like in the middle, I would say. But yeah, as I said before, as far as guest features go that really had me enjoy this album, let's say Kid Cudi and Mr. Hudson. And I know that this is one of Kanye's more personal albums. I know that this had came out a year after his mother's passing. And, you know, that's why lyrically I still think it's a really good album. And that's why I put it in front of Yeezus and Ye. So let's move on now to number 5 on my list. And, you know, number 5, I'm going to have to give it to The Life of Pablo. The Life of Pablo came out 3 years ago, and at the time when this album came out, I was really hyped because I figured he has to come off with a better album than Yeezus based on how I reacted to that album at its release. And, you know, looking back at it, Life of Pablo I still think it's a good album. I think that there's still a lot of songs that I still have in heavy rotation whenever I have my phone on shuffle, whenever I exercise. And, you know, looking back at this album, I'll say my favorite songs that I still listen to, I would say, would be "Father, Stretch My Hands," Part 1, "Feedback," "Famous," let's see, "Fuck My Life," "Real Friends," "No Parties in LA," and "Fade." Those songs I named, I think that was about 6, maybe 7 of them, I still listen to, you know, 3 years later after the Life of Pablo came out. And I could say lyrically, I think Kanye was all over the place with this album, and that was a little bit of a flaw I had as I look back at this album. But at the same time, I still think it was very enjoyable. Some songs that to this day I think kind of haven't really aged well, I would say, would be Part 2 of Father Stretch My Hands, mainly because of the designer, feature. The fact that Part 2 is really just a remix of Panda, and that song is very outdated at this point. So there's that song. Same thing I would say with Freestyle 4. The fact that the overall sound style of designer has really fallen off in these last couple years. Still, as I go through this track list, I would say that I still enjoy Facts, the Charlie Heat version, but I know that that is just a pretty much Kanye's rendition of Drake and Future's Jumpman. But, overall, it's not in my top 5. It almost makes it into the top 5 albums, but it's still a good album. Favorite guest features, and there's a lot of them if you look at this feature listing, would be Chance the Rapper. I would also say The Weeknd, Kid Cudi, Kendrick Lamar, Post Malone, and Rihanna and Swizz Beatz. They're all my favorite guest features on this album. At number 4, I am going to give it to My Dark Twisted Fantasies. At the time, I really enjoyed this album. I still enjoy this album now. It's just, it's hard when you try and compare an artist's music from later on to the beginning of their, discography. And I think that this album is definitely up at the top for Kanye's best. This album was like his rap comeback after going 3 years without a rap album, because, you have 808s and Heartbreak in there, which is a pop album. He didn't put out anything in 2009, and this is where we come back to, Kanye rapping again, and I would honestly say that this was a good comeback album. My favorite songs on this album are Power, All of the Lights, So Appalled, Devil in a New Dress, Runaway, Hell of a Life, and Lost in the World. Those songs I still continue to occasionally listen to when I have my phone on shuffle, and I think that they have a lot of replay value to them. An honorable mention, I would say, is the intro, Dark Fantasy, as well as Gorgeous with Raycon and Kid Cudi. At the time when I heard this album back in 2010, I remember Kanye put out a short film, and I think all of the songs, maybe a few might not have been included, were used in the short film. And I think that really helped me and made me enjoy this album a lot. And, I think every song on this album overall is definitely a highlight. I just named a few of them that I think I would say I enjoyed overall the most. My favorite guest features on this album, I would say, were Swizz Beatz, Jay-Z, Pusha T, Sci-Hi, and RZA, and also John Legend and Rick Ross. They were all my favorite guest features. And to be honest, when you look at Kanye's albums he's put out since this album, I don't think any of them have measured to that type of level of quality. Like I said, I think that The Life of Pablo was a great album, but if you put it right next to My Dark Twisted Fantasies, I feel like a lot of people would say that they feel a little disappointed when you put them, just because you look at the overall, lyrical content, and also maybe from a production standpoint. because I know that this felt like more of a concept album than The Life of Pablo. But hence why I have my Dark Twisted Fantasy ranked at number 4. At number 3, it's gonna come to probably no surprise that I'm gonna have to go with Graduation, ranked at number 3. And Graduation, I remember when this album had first came out, around then, 2007, Kanye went up against 50 Cent to determine, both released albums on the same day, and they wanted to determine who would outsell one another. And as a result, Kanye ended up being the winner. When I look at this album all these years later, I would say that it still sounds really good. And if you listen to it in comparison to a lot of his later work, it's different. It stands out. Kanye experimented with more of a electronic type of sound. Still used a lot of heavy samples, but I think you had more synthesizers used in some of the production. And now if I'm going to pick my favorite songs that I still like to this day, I would have to go with Stronger, I Wonder, Good Life, Can't Tell Me Nothing, Flashing Lights, and The Glory. Those songs definitely, I think, really hit today. They still connect. And those, I'll say, my favorite. Some honorable mentions would be Everything I Am, which has scratches from DJ Premier. Homecoming with Chris Martin from Coldplay. And lastly, one more honorable mention would be Good Morning. Now, overall, I still think it was hard for me at the time when I heard this album to see if I would say that it's better, than Kanye's first 2 albums. But I will say that it is around the same quality. And like I said, if I had to pick between Graduation and My Dark Twisted Beautiful Fantasy, I would say both are good albums, but I would have to go with Graduation just because I think I enjoyed a lot more of the overall sound of the album. I didn't think it was too feature heavy as well. That, you look at this track list and there's only 3, 4, 5. There is only 5 guest features on 13 songs, because I'm excluding the DJ Premier scratches. Now, when you look at My Dark Twisted Beautiful Fantasies, that album had a guest feature on nearly every song. Maybe there was only like 2 or 3 that didn't have any guest features. So I think that, from a solo perspective, Kanye really held it down in comparison, to a lot of his later albums. So moving on, we're down now to my last 2 albums, and this is going to come to a surprise probably to a lot of people. At number 2 from me, it's going to be The College Dropout. And, I think that this album, it's the introduction to Kanye West. And for me, I didn't hear the album when it first came out, but I will say I heard the first single at the time prior to The College Dropout's release back in 2004. Back at the very end of 2003. It could have been also maybe early 2004, if I'm not mistaken, but I heard Slow Jams, the song Kanye had with Jamie Foxx and Twista, and that's still, to this day, one of my all-time favorite Kanye songs. After this album, The College Dropout came out, I do remember hearing 2 Words and also hearing Jesus Walks back in 2004. And yeah, to this day, I still enjoy those 2 songs as well. Now, in narrowing The College Dropout for my overall favorite songs, it would be All Falls Down, Spaceships, Jesus Walks, Never Let Me Down, Slow Jams, Get 'Em High, Breathe In, Breathe Out, Through the Wire, and Family Business. I still enjoy and love all those songs still to this day. And when I look back at an album that goes, to the early 2000s, it's hard not to call the College Dropout a classic hip hop album from the 2000s era. And so I name all my favorite songs. The songs that I think had really great guest features would be, I remember I loved Never Let Me Down with Jay-Z's feature. With Spaceship, GLC, and Consequence, I enjoy their guest features the most. From a chorus perspective, I like Ludacris's chorus on Breathe In, Breathe Out. For Slow Jams introduced me to Twista, and I think he had like an amazing, I know that this song counts as a Twista song and a Kanye song, but he had a great verse. Jamie Foxx had an amazing chorus on Slow Jams, and cannot forget about Talib Kweli and Common. So, like I said, at number 2, it's going to be the College Dropout. Also, too, the fact that I haven't named earlier, from a production standpoint, Kanye messed with so many different soul samples when he produced this album. I gotta give that a shout out. I enjoyed a lot of the soul production, different sample chops from Kanye. So at number 2, the College Dropout. Alright, and now lastly, let's get into my number 1 album, solo album from Kanye West, and that's Late Registration. And now I feel like most people are going to disagree with me just because, I feel like a lot of people I've talked about Kanye with have either told me that they believe that they think that they go with My Dark Twisted Beautiful Fantasies or The College Dropout as Kanye's overall best album. There's where I have to disagree. This album, to me, I think is Kanye's overall best album. And let's go through the track list. This album, Late Registration, I remember back when that album first came out. And the reason I remember it, because at the time, the 2 songs that I think got the most play that were on the radio, I would say a lot, the music video went viral, would be Gold Digger and Touch the Sky. Both are 2 great songs off the album, but as the album overall, I'm going to have to, when naming my favorite songs, I'm going to have to go with Heard 'Em Say, Touch the Sky, Drive Slow, My Way Home, Crack Music, Roses, Diamonds from Sierra Leone, the original and the remix, and Hey Mama. Oh, and honorable mention would be Gone. Another honorable mention would also be Bring Me Down, featuring Brandy. Now, as a sound overall, he continued to use the different, samples, like soul samples. The difference is with Late Registration and the College Dropout is I think his overall sound was even better. And even though this album was very feature heavy, I think that every feature did their thing. No one disappointed me when I look back at this album. And it's a surprise too, because some of these songs I didn't think I would like as I look back at this album. Like, I still enjoy Heard 'Em Say even all these years later, since Adam Levine has blown up with Maroon 5 in comparison to back when this came out in 2005, And also too, I never thought that I would come back listen to a lot of music, like a song featuring Paul Wall. I mean, like I said, Drive Slow to this day is still one of my favorites. You have overall my favorite guest features are Lupe Fiasco, Common, The Game, Brandy, Jay-Z, Nas, Cameron, Consequence, and Adam Levine. And this is my own personal opinion, but yeah, it's a good song, but I don't see why people rank it so highly. Is Gold Digger. I thought it was a good song when I heard it back then, but it was so overplayed at the time. I think that the music video still is a great one, still stands out, but I put Gold Digger all the way at the bottom as far as like my least favorite song on the overall album. So, this concludes my album rankings for Kanye West album discography. And you know what? I'll name them one more time in order. So at number 8 is Yeezus. Number 7 is Ye. Number 6, 808s and Heartbreak. Number 5, The Life of Pablo. Number 4, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasies. Number 3, Graduation. Number 2, The College Dropout. And number 1, Late Registration. That is my album rankings from worst to best for Kanye West. And now, as you can see on his discography, it shows Yandhi with a To Be Decided. I'm hoping that this comes out this year, and it's going to take a while before I give that a ranking. But I think this is my overall ranking of Kanye's album solo discography of his first 8 albums. So I'm thinking I'm gonna continue to make this a segment where I go through different artists or bands and rank their album discography. If you have any suggestions of artists or bands that you'd like ranking, let me know in the comments section. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video. Peace.